So he covers everything Arizona Cardinals and is a part of the Locked On Network. And so locking in on Arizona Cardinals, joining us, Alex Clancy via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard. All right. We got ourselves an interesting offseason with the Cardinals. I'm really, really curious as to how they're going to manage with obviously with what this whole last season looked like. In my opinion, they looked really lax under Cliff Kingsbury. And I think personally, I think it's time that they need to get an alpha in the room. And I'm almost leaning towards a possibility of Brian Flores. How do you kind of see this offseason happening with the Cardinals? And what are the ideal moves that they're going to need to make to possibly bounce back in this division?
Yeah, they need a hard reset. Over the last 4 seasons with Cliff Kingsbury and the last 10 years with Steve Keim. This is a brand new ushering in of the Arizona Cardinals in name only. They hired outside the organization for GM, which was a huge move, a huge step in the right direction for Michael Bidwell. My hierarchy for head coach hires or head coach prospects that started, right when we found out Cliff Kingsbury was officially getting fired. Number one is D'Amico Ryan's defensive coordinator for the 49ers. I know now it looks to be an outside shot, but because I think that he's linked to the Texans job a lot more strongly with more strength than over the last couple of weeks, which makes sense. Get him out of the NFC. It's a win for the Cardinals regardless. Sean Payton now seems to be the apple of everybody's eye after spending 7.5 hours with Michael Bidwell and Monty Ossenford a couple of days ago. And Brian Flores, the whole idea is anybody they choose out of this pool before Dan Quinn went back to Denver and before Frank Reich took the Carolina job, it all would be a step forward from where they were for 4 years. So that's something that needs to be appreciated and understood, that Michael Bidwell is really trying to do things in a complete 180 fashion from what he's done pretty much during the entire tenure that he took over, the reins of the Cardinals from his dad who passed away.
Yeah, and I know that this franchise, and I know that there's been a ton of history to where they haven't had great seasons, at least not until they had Kurt Warner and then they had everybody on that offense. I loved watching that team win Super Bowl 43. I mean, it was a team that shook everybody in the NFC, but to get themselves back to that style and level of play, it's going to take a little bit to where they need to fix the right pieces. They need to get the same flow of offense happening, and the defense has to be shut down. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many times they've had a couple of coughed up plays. Then it's cost them a lot of that momentum. And you can either agree or disagree, but I've felt like in the last few years with the Cardinals, dating back to when Steve Wilkes was the head coach, they haven't been able to fix their offensive line. I loved the addition of Rodney Hudson. I thought, okay, this is going to probably boost a little bit to fix it. But since they even had Josh Rosen as a quarterback and you have Kyler Murray, the offensive line looked atrocious. They're still running for their lives out of the pocket. And then on top of all of that, I'm not seeing much of the production up on the defense. So it just kind of feels like they need to find that balance somewhere in between, right?
Yeah, the offensive line, Rodney Hudson was mulling retirement. He had an unexcused absence from mandatory minicamp. People thought he was going to retire. He came back, cashed in, played 4 or 5 games, and was hurt the rest of the year. So that was kind of the final, swan song you'd think from Rodney Hudson in his career. Just he got about $10 million richer. The offensive line was decimated with injury last year. But yeah, I mean, I was pounding the table. What I wanted to happen in the draft that would have leveled up the Cardinals roster from, a pretty successful 2021, aside from, the last 5 or 7 games in the playoff game, was offensive line, pass rush, and corner. And Steve Keim decided to trade for wide receiver and draft a tight end in the second round, which, it's, I say the Arizona Cardinals are the definition of insanity, doing the same things, expecting different results. Regarding the defense, that was kind of a sticking point for me all year, because if you look at after the 2021 season ended, every major move was made to benefit the offense. Trading for Hollywood Brown, extending Cliff Kingsbury, drafting Trey McBride. Everything was done to bolster the offense, and losing Chandler Jones, which ended up being, fine. Jordan Hicks playing meaningful snaps in Minnesota, veteran leadership. The Arizona Cardinals defense was shunned this offseason. They were ignored this offseason. And then going into 2022, it's like, well, okay, the defense's job is to set the table for the offense so the offense can eat. And the offense was fasting all year. The defense wasn't set to win games. They were set to set up the offense to take care of business, and the offense did the antithesis of that. So that's why they give us so many points. They weren't built. They don't have the talent. That's on Vince Joseph. They do not have the talent to withstand the rigors playing against all of these offenses in 2022. It just wasn't built that way.
Yeah, and I mean, and there was a bunch of struggles too, because and maybe you might have evaluated this as well, because I think with Kyler Murray, I know the biggest thing that I said going into the new season was, first of all, you got a massive contract extension. There's going to be a lot of heat that's on your shoulders, and that happens with a lot of quarterbacks who get big time money. Now, I do say it is an offensive centric league, and the quarterback, you want to give him as much pieces as possible. You got to protect him at all costs, and you got to get him the right personnel that's going to trust in his abilities in order for him to move the offense. How did you evaluate Kyler Murray all throughout this season? And are there some adjustments that he's going to need to make? Because I know the biggest argument was he completely focused? Was he the kind that, like, he felt like he was invested in this offense? There's been a lot of question marks as to how his performance was throughout the season.
Yeah, I think how invested he was is just, it's lazy. The whole homework clause, that's a huge faux pas on Michael Bidwell's part. You could have sat him down on the couch and be like, dude, what are we doing here? I'm going to give you all this money. You're going to watch some more film and it'll be fine. And I would have respected Michael Bidwell a lot more if he didn't rescind it, which just showed, him backtracking. It's like, okay, if you're going to be a jerk and do that and have it leak and all that stuff, keep it at least. Have a backbone. But I think that was the last bad move that Michael Bidwell has made up until this point. Kyler Murray, he didn't take the leap that everybody thought he was in year 4. Because, he's had kind of the same journey as Josh Allen. I compare them a lot on the podcast, even though they're not, Josh Allen's almost a foot taller than, it should, like, stature-wise, they're not the same. But Josh Allen really struggled his first year and a half, like really struggled. And Kyler Murray came out, played a lot better than Josh Allen did in his first year and a half. And then year 3 was the year Kyler Murray popped, and they didn't follow through. And then last year was just a sham. It was kind of like let's shake this etch-a-sketch and start over. My biggest thing with Kyler Murray, and he's not absolved of all blame and necessity to get better, but he's doing this by himself. Like when Jared Goff was with the Rams for a while, Sean McVay got all the credit for Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I used to say was Jared Goff wins because of Sean McVay, and Kyler Murray wins in spite of Cliff Kingsbury. And I feel like that's what it's been. So with the inability of Cliff Kingsbury to elevate and coach the one player he was brought in to coach and elevate, I feel like bringing in an adult, bringing in somebody with some status, bringing in somebody with some history of winning football, because Cliff Kingsbury never won anywhere he went, ever, before coming to the NFL. It will do immeasurable it'll have immeasurable benefits for Kyler Murray. And we're going to find out. Band-Aid's going to be ripped off for Kyler Murray in 2023.
Yeah, and you got to think that's got to be a rough stain to get off of for Cliff Kingsbury, because he didn't have any success in Texas A&M, and he had Patrick Mahomes, and then comes into the NFL, and he has Kyler Murray, who's a fantastic talent out of Oklahoma, and you couldn't do anything from there. I mean, yeah, you had one winning season, but after that, you couldn't build upon it. You couldn't keep the consistency. So, yeah, that's got to be a rough stain for Cliff Kingsbury. I feel like that. I don't know. I feel like that if he could, he probably would go into an offensive coordinating position, or maybe he might end up trying to reset and keep, and start back up in college somewhere that they may need a reshape of the program, but we don't know. I mean, there's several questions about him, but in the end, I mean, yeah, the Cardinals need something new. So what's the latest status as far as DeAndre Hopkins is concerned? I know that has been a topic where, is Hopkins going to be leaving out of Arizona? I felt like that if this is the move, Arizona was going to be good with, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there were a couple games when I watched Kyler Murray without DeAndre Hopkins, and it looked like he was kind of lost from there. Didn't have his big time target. The offense didn't really play the same. Now, I will say, I like Rondale Moore, and I do like Hollywood Brown and a couple of those pieces. I think you can build something off that. But I think at this point, if they're going to be moving because they got to get something new in the building and really reshape this organization, I feel like if they make this move, you got to be acquiring some picks. And could that potentially be Arizona's going to get some more real good weapons maybe come into the draft?
I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is still elite, in my opinion.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I don't understand the disdain of, oh, well, you're gonna have to extend him and he's 31. The dude isn't fast. He's never been fast. So when he gets older, he's not gonna have to change his game because speed was his weapon. Tyreek Hill's not gonna be Tyreek Hill when he's 33. He's gonna be slower. Like DeAndre Hopkins runs with cinder blocks on his feet, but he always seems to get where he needs to go. He catches everything. I'm in the camp that they need to figure out, especially if Sean Payton becomes the head coach, they need to figure out how to extend him and have him retire an Arizona Cardinal. One of my biggest fears going into 2022 with him being on the shelf with the PED suspension for the first 6 weeks was the Cardinals treading water and staying afloat, because I saw that if DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown didn't play meaningful snaps together in 2022, that means that DeAndre Hopkins would be gone. And that's exactly what happened. Like, after 6 weeks, DeAndre Hopkins comes back. Hollywood Brown gets hurt in the last game before DeAndre Hopkins is set to return. We haven't seen two of the better receivers in the NFL on the same field at the same time. And that's something that there are no optics for now, or no optics on now, which makes it easier to potentially trade him. The wrinkle is, if Mickey Loomis wants a first-round pick in 2023 as part of the package for the New Orleans Saints, for Sean Payton, which I think is absolutely absurd. There are teams, some of them still in the playoffs, I mean, namely Kansas City, that would happily trade their late first-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins to be the last piece of their offensive puzzle. And the Cardinals can parlay that pick into trading to the Saints for Sean Payton. But if I'm Sean Payton, I want DeAndre Hopkins on the field. I want him as part of this offense. People don't understand how incredibly valuable he still is. He put up massive numbers when he came back. Massive numbers. 10-plus catches, over 100 yards, touchdown. Like, he's still DeAndre Hopkins. So they need to figure out a way to make it cap-friendly and have him retire an Arizona Cardinal, in my humblest of opinions. But if they do move him, I think it would be as a piece to acquire a pick to parlay over to New Orleans for Sean Payton.
Yeah, and you got to think too, because this is an organization in the last couple of years, they've had a pedigree of real good wide receivers. I mean, Anquan Bolden, Larry Fitzgerald, and then you bring in DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown. I mean, it ain't like they don't lack on offensive receivers, because these guys are going to be built up, they're going to be working well with it, and then it becomes now shaped to where this is a really elite offense. So this draft is going to be really interesting, because I just see this to where, and I said this in my show several times, I'll talk more about it, but we always every year get either 3 or 4 quarterbacks in this league where 2 or 3 of them are going to be big hits, and there's always one that's going to be bound to be a bust. I mean, we watched in the 2020 draft. I mean, that was a great draft. We saw a little more of the truths about Tua Tagovailoa being, challenged as a left-handed, but yet at his size, I'm a little bit, worried about his health. And then the past draft where we had Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson was clearly a bust. And Trevor Lawrence, obviously going into the playoffs, looked like a number 1 pick. But these 4 quarterbacks, as far as evaluating, I feel like if 3 of those 4, if they're in the right situations, I'm feeling like Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, and possibly Bryce Young, because I feel like CJ Stroud, we just got the best of him during the bowl game he played at. But usually when those quarterbacks come in, there's always one that's kind of bound to be challenged if he's not in the right position, right?
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, like, what I don't understand is, why is Bryce Young looked at as Bryce Young smaller than Kyler Murray? Like, yeah. I don't know why it's just that people are just like, oh, he went to Alabama, so he's frail compared to Kyler Murray. He's young and he'll grow in his body. CJ Stroud's 6'3". Will Levis, Will Levis is like a social media darling, because everybody's seen the videos of him just slinging it. It's just like a cannon shot out of his arm with really tight spiral and really effortless motion, over the top throw. Like, that's why people know who Will Levis is. It's because of the viral videos of him just ripping it Um, Zach Wilson could do that too. That's what got Zach Wilson drafted, was that throw at the combine. That one throw got him drafted number 2 overall, which is insane to me. I don't think there's any quarterbacks here that I would 100% trade the farm for. But look what San Francisco did with Trey Lance 2 years ago.
Yep.
Like it's about potential. Now it's about getting your guy, and it'll be interesting to see. And I don't know if this will happen or not, but is there going to be a Brock Purdy effect where it's like not necessarily at the top, but it's like, you know what? Let's save our 4th round pick, draft a linebacker, draft an offensive lineman, and see if we can get a quarterback in the 6th round. See if we can strike gold. Brock Purdy's making $77,000 guaranteed in his entire contract. Mm-hmm. If they win the Super Bowl, he'll make double that. So, like, it's just, I don't know what the quarterback market's going to be. This year, it seems like it's kind of forcing it. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to benefit the Arizona Cardinals because they're going to have the ability, most likely, to draft the best non-quarterback player at 3 overall.
Yeah, and so I think about that too, because the Cardinals are in a comfortable position in the draft because now there are a bunch of positions that need to be addressed. Obviously, JJ Watt retiring, they're going to probably look for an edge rusher. I think too they got to at the very least upgrade that D line because you got to have somebody who's going to be a run disruptor and somebody that's going to at the very least force pressure on opposing offenses. Because I'll tell you what, I do like Isaiah Simmons and I do like Budda Baker, but I do feel like at times, and I know that this was kind of an effect after Patrick Peterson left, that the secondaries, they got to be shut down. You know, they really, because especially when you're facing a San Francisco offense with Brandon Ayuk and several of them, they got some speed. You got to have guys that are well capable of doing man-to-man coverage and even, cover 2s or 3s. And so, this has got to be an interesting spot for the Cardinals, but where do you see them as far as their draft needs and who you are possibly eyeballing that you evaluated that you think would be a perfect fit for the Cardinals moving into this organization?
Yeah, they finally have a full slate of picks. Steve Keim's not making them, which is fantastic. I think Will Anderson's the pick, edge rusher, and I think because edge rusher is such a premium position that you're going to pay, like, so say he hits, you get 4 years of inexpensive employment from a guy that's going to end up making whatever it is at that point, 80 million guaranteed, 120 million guaranteed. We don't know what the pay scale would be then. Jalen Carter's the other guy from Georgia that runs stuff from Georgia. He's an absolute machine. But the Cardinals it's going to take 2 drafts and 2 off seasons to build this roster. Well, what I equated to, the metaphor that I use, or the analogy that I use is, when you're younger and you have one of your best friends comes over and you guys, play with your toys when you're 5 and 6 years old, and your best friend gets picked up and he doesn't help you pick up your toys and it's just a mess everywhere. That's what Steve Keim left this organization as. So it's going to take a draft, an offseason of nailing both to a T. Dictionary definition of you hit on 80% of your high picks 2 years in a row. And the Cardinals will go from the shambles that they're in now to, especially if Kyler Murray takes a step forward with the new head coach, to a force to be reckoned with. It doesn't take very much time. It takes 18 months to really turn something around if drafted and free agent brought properly. But, in the beginning, like, what they didn't do, it should have been Tyler Linderbaum at 23 overall last year. They would have had their all-pro center for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
It should have been Drake Jackson, edge rusher from USC in the 2nd round, or trading up to draft David Ajabo because they had a 3rd-round pick extra for trading for Hollywood Brown. They could have moved up and got a guy of impact at the edge rush position. They didn't. They drafted a tight end. So now they're even further behind the 8 ball. So it's edge rusher, it's offensive line, it's corner, it's interior defensive line. It's everything. So it's really, like, luckily, again, there's going to be a couple quarterbacks up top that you'd hope that for the Cardinals, that Indy's going to move up to number 1. For Chicago will bounce back to 4. It'll go quarterback with Indy and Houston, and the Cardinals will draft Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. It's a win either way. But I think Will Anderson should be the guy because of how I think the Cardinals' leading sack getter, I think it was JJ Watt had a bunch of sacks, but, like, from a pass rusher perspective, I think it was around 5 was the lead pass rusher last year with sacks. They need it immediately. You could sign, it's a lot easier to sign veteran corner talent than freakishly talented edge rushers who are 22 years old. And that's why you get the inexpensive talent to the draft.
Yeah, and I completely agree because the younger that edge rushing position, I mean, good God, we watch Micah Parsons all the time.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's a hybrid player and is just hyper athletic, he's getting to the quarterback and he's stopping the run too. So, yeah, I agree with you. Having that position being younger because they got fresh legs, they obviously have that attacking instinct where they're just there to disrupt the opposing offense and really put pressure on it, especially in a division where you got Kyle Shanahan and that remarkable offense he has in San Francisco. And then you got the Rams. We know they took a bounce back this year, but they're shaping right now to where they're trying to reload and still be competitive within this division. And then the Seahawks, I mean, out of nowhere, they just started. There was so much heckles on them, and then they finished the way they did. And I'm like, that's where I'm like, all that high heat is on the Cardinals now because you watched from the entirety of the season, the Seahawks made huge, interesting moves. They looked like it didn't matter whether Russell Wilson was going to stay or not. They were still going to stay the same. And now they're so much younger and there's so much young talent there that they're bound for something special. And then there's the Rams and then the Niners. So I think the biggest objective, because you got to get somebody in that's willing to go toe to toe with Pete Carroll, with Kyle Shanahan, and with Sean McVay, because Kingsbury was just getting knocked around everywhere from all three of these coaches. And then having the offense and, of course, the defense to disrupting everybody within this division. So that's where I'm like, yeah, a lot of this high heat, there is no way possible that the Arizona Cardinals could possibly ruin up this draft, right? And they've got to be able to do this within the 2 years.
Yep, that's about right.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how the Cardinals are, but I'm excited for it. I mean, ultimately, they got to get the right people, they got to get the right personnel, and hopefully, this will be something to where Kyler Murray, he's enjoying this, he looks invested in, and this offense could start to thrive, and the defense could start to support the offense to getting the points up there. Well, Alex, I appreciate you coming on by. Where can everybody find you as far as Cardinals content and everything they need to know coming into this upcoming offseason in the draft?
You can follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner, the YouTube channel Locked on Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, and free and available wherever you get your podcast.
All righty. Well, I appreciate your time up on here, Alex. Have a great rest of your weekend. And let me get your picks for this weekend. Who are you kind of feeling that are going to be out on top to get to Super Bowl 57?
I'm taking the Eagles and the Chiefs. Cincinnati is given the best quarterback in the NFL a lot of bulletin board material over the last week. So I feel like regardless of the roster that the Chiefs have compared to past years, regardless of how potent the Bengals offense is, I'm taking Patty and Jalen Hurts. Like, Jalen Hurts has really emerged as potential powerhouse in this league for a long time. A dude that couldn't throw a football really when he was at Alabama. It's a wild transformation from what we've seen. I don't think the 49ers defense is good enough to withstand both sides of the football that Philly can bring at him.
Well, and you got to think too, Brock Purdy is facing against a tough elite defense. So this will be the first time we'll see him getting that tested to where I don't know. I feel this game going close, but yeah, I completely feel you on that game. But it will be interesting with Kansas City and Cincinnati. Yeah, all righty, Alex, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we will definitely see you soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is